Part 1. The wake-up call. They say life moves too fast now. The emails. The meetings. The constant buzzing of phones. People complain about not having enough time, about feeling trapped in a world that never stops spinning. But here's the truth, and I learned this long ago. Life doesn't slow down for you. You have to take control. I remember sitting in a crowded train station one morning years ago. People were rushing past me, heads down, coffee in hand, eyes glued to their phones. Everyone looked tired. Everyone looked lost. And it hit me. Most people aren't living their lives. They're surviving them. They wake up in a rush, fight through traffic, sit in meetings they don't even remember, eat lunch at their desks, scroll through endless notifications, and collapse into bed at night wondering where the day went. Then they wake up and do it all over again. I saw it everywhere. In boardrooms, in small businesses, in young college students. People weren't in charge of their lives. Chaos was. And chaos is a thief. It steals your time, your focus, your dreams. It eats up your days and leaves you with nothing but the feeling that you're falling behind. But here's what I discovered, and it changed everything for me. Life will not organize itself. Life will not improve by luck. Life only changes when you decide to take charge. Intentionally. I didn't come to this realization overnight. Like many of you, I used to think success would somehow find me. That if I worked hard enough, if I stayed busy enough, the pieces would magically fall into place. But busyness isn't the same as progress. And if you don't create order in your life, chaos will gladly do it for you. I still remember my own breaking point. I was running 3 projects at the same time. My phone rang nonstop. My desk was a mess. Every morning, I'd sit down with a cup of coffee and promise myself, today I'm going to get organized. Today I'll catch up. But I never did. I ended each day exhausted, my to-do list longer than it had been that morning. My energy was scattered, my mind was foggy, and I was always behind. And the worst part? Deep down, I knew it was my fault. One night, after a particularly chaotic day, I sat alone in my office long after everyone else had left. Papers everywhere. Emails unanswered. A notebook filled with half-written plans. And I asked myself a hard question. If my life continues like this for the next 5 years, where will I end up? The answer was clear. Nowhere. That night, I made a decision. A decision that would change everything. I would take control. I would stop living reactively. I would build order into every corner of my life. And when I did, my entire world shifted. Here's the first lesson I learned, and I want you to remember this. You don't need more hours in your day. You need more focus. You don't need to do more. You need to do the right things. When you take the time to organize your life, you don't just manage your hours, you take command of your future. Success stops being some far-off dream. It becomes the natural result of well-used days. And when you wake up with a plan, when you know what matters and what doesn't, when your environment and your schedule are working for you, not against you, something magical happens. The chaos stops pushing you, and the world begins to open up. Now, I know what you're thinking. Napoleon, that sounds great, but my life is too busy. I've got work, family, bills, responsibilities. I don't have time to plan every detail. And to that I say, that's exactly why you need to do it. Organization is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's the line that separates the person who moves forward from the one who stays stuck. Because let me tell you, the majority of people out there are living on autopilot. They wake up late, rush from one task to another, forget half their commitments, live in constant stress, and still wonder why nothing changes. They don't need more motivation. They need order. Without order, your energy gets scattered, your mind gets cloudy, your goals lose their sharpness, and you become a slave to a life of constant reaction, A life you didn't design, but one you allowed. But when you decide, truly decide, to organize your life, something powerful happens. You regain control. You find clarity. You start moving forward with purpose. Instead of drifting through days that all look the same. It starts small. You begin by taking control of your time. Not by obsessing over clocks or endless to-do lists, but by making intentional choices. What time do you wake up? What do you do in that first hour? What tasks are draining your energy but adding nothing to your goals? You can't improve what you haven't measured, and if you don't create structure, you'll keep spinning in circles, busy, but going nowhere. So here's what I want you to do, starting today. Stop giving your hours away to chance. Time is your most valuable resource, and you've been acting like it's unlimited. But it's not. Every minute you spend without intention is a piece of your life you will never get back. You want to change your life? Then start by changing your day. Wake up with a plan. Decide what matters most. And commit to doing those things before the world's distractions come for you. That night in my office, when I finally chose to take control, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel confident. Honestly, I felt overwhelmed. But here's the secret. You don't have to feel ready. You just have to start. And once you start, once you taste what it feels like to live with structure and intention, you will never go back. Because you'll realize that order isn't a prison. It's freedom. Freedom to rest. Freedom to focus. Freedom to create the life you actually want. And this, my friend, is where your transformation begins. Would you like me to start part 2 next? Continuing the story with the next phase of building systems and structure? Part 2. The hidden weight of chaos. I used to believe that chaos was just about time. That if I organized my schedule, cleaned my desk, and planned my day, I'd be free. But I was wrong. One morning, I sat in a quiet cafe, reviewing my new routines. My calendar was neat. My desk was spotless. My hours were mapped out. On paper, I was organized, but inside, I felt drained. It wasn't until a man I deeply respected said something that hit me like a thunderbolt. Napoleon, order isn't just about time or space. It's about who you let into your life. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself, no, I just need to work harder, sleep less, focus more. But the truth was staring me in the face. It wasn't my schedule holding me back. It was my relationships. I started looking closer. The friends who laughed when I shared my dreams. The colleagues who drained my energy with constant complaints. The family members who loved me but didn't understand the vision I had for my life. It was like trying to run a marathon with a backpack full of stones. You can do it for a while, sure. But eventually, the weight crushes you. Here's what I've learned, and I want you to remember this. If you want true order in your life, you need order in your relationships. Every bond you have either builds you up or drags you down. I began asking myself hard questions. Does this person elevate me, or do they pull me lower? Do they challenge me, or do they keep me numb and comfortable? Are they helping me grow? Or are they silently keeping me stuck? And I realized something painful. Some of the people closest to me didn't want me to change. Not because they hated me. Not because they were bad. But because my growth reminded them of their own stagnation. That day, I made another decision. One that wasn't easy, but that saved my future. I would start protecting my energy as fiercely as my time. I set boundaries. I stopped saying yes to every invitation. I stopped answering every message the second it came, and I stopped carrying other people's problems as if they were my own. And for the first time in my life, I understood that saying no isn't selfish. It's wise. Because you cannot build a powerful, focused life if you're being pulled in every direction by the noise and needs of everyone around you. But this isn't just about walking away from the wrong people. It's also about moving closer to the right ones. I started seeking out people who lived with intention, people who valued their time, people who thought in terms of growth and goals, not gossip and complaints. And do you know what happens when you surround yourself with people who are disciplined, driven, and focused? You rise, not because they force you to, but because their energy, their habits, their conversations, they pull you higher. You start thinking bigger. You start acting sharper. You start demanding more of yourself. Because what surrounds you shapes you, whether you realize it or not. And if you don't have that kind of environment, then you build it yourself. I tell young men this all the time. You control what you consume, what you read, who you follow, the conversations you engage in, the information you let into your mind. All of it is shaping you, silently, powerfully, every single day. And if you don't filter your environment, you get contaminated. Your focus scatters. Your energy drains. Your growth slows to a crawl. So here's a rule I live by: be selective. Know what you say yes to. Know what you say no to. And, most importantly, know who you walk with. Because you cannot build a life of power and purpose if you're surrounded by emotional chaos. You can't think clearly if you're absorbing other people's fears and doubts. You can't act boldly if you're trapped in a crowd that's afraid to move. You are called to more. And to reach that higher level, you need clarity on every front: mental, physical, financial, emotional, and yes, relational. Everything is connected. Everything affects everything else. Everything matters. As I started creating order in my relationships, I noticed something incredible. My mind grew quieter. My focus sharpened. My confidence rose. And that's when I discovered the next layer of true order: purpose. Because here's the truth: you can have the cleanest desk, the most organized calendar, the sharpest systems. But if you don't know why you're doing it all, you'll still feel lost. Most men I meet are busy, but empty. They're running hard in the wrong direction. They reworking themselves into the ground, chasing goals that don't belong to them. They've mastered activity, but not purpose. And without purpose, organization feels like a burden. With purpose, it becomes a necessity. I remember the first time I sat down and asked myself, what do I truly want my life to look like in 5 years? It was uncomfortable. I didn't have all the answers. But even asking the question was enough to change me. Because clarity doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. Think of it like flying an airplane. A pilot never flies in a perfectly straight line. He drifts. The wind pushes him off course. But he knows where he's going, so he makes small adjustments along the way. That's what purpose does for you. It keeps you correcting. It keeps you focused. It keeps you moving forward, even when life tries to blow you off track. And so I made another decision. From that moment on, every action, every habit, every relationship would run through one simple filter. Does this align with the man I want to become, or does it pull me away? If it aligned, it stayed. If it didn't, it was gone. And slowly, my life began to transform. But let me give you one more warning, and this is important. Order without purpose is just control. Purpose without order is just chaos. You need both. Because when your purpose becomes your compass and your order becomes your system, that's when you become unstoppable. And then there's one more area of life that most men ignore. Until it burns them. Money. I've seen it too many times. Men who work hard, build good habits, surround themselves with the right people, but who live in constant financial stress. And no matter how disciplined you are, you cannot build a free, powerful life if your finances are a mess. Money may not be everything, but make no mistake, it affects almost everything. Your peace, your decisions, your opportunities. If your money is out of control, you will always feel a low hum of anxiety in the background. And that stress will bleed into every area of your life. The first step to financial order isn't earning more. It's facing the truth. Sit down. Write down your income. Write down every expense, fixed and variable. Look at the numbers with brutal honesty. No excuses. No sugarcoating. Because you cannot improve what you won't measure. When I did this for the first time, I was shocked. I saw how many, little, expenses were silently stealing my future. So I made a plan. I cut the leaks. I set aside a small percentage for savings, even when it was only 5%. And most importantly, I trained my mind to value the future over momentary pleasure. That simple act, taking control of my money, gave me something I never felt before: peace. Financial order isn't punishment. It's power. It's freedom. It's the ability to make decisions calmly and invest with vision. And here's a hard truth you need to accept right now. If you don't know how to live with less than you earn, you will always be broke, even if your income doubles. Because financial freedom isn't about how much you make. It's about how much control you have. Would you like me to move to part 3, where we dive into building daily systems and habits for unstoppable momentum? Here's a 1,000-word, story-style rewrite for part 3, written in the tone and principles of Napoleon Hill, while keeping the motivational and disciplined essence intact. The clock had barely struck 5 when Daniel's alarm rang. Unlike before, when he would hit snooze and roll over, today he moved with precision. He had made a decision, and that decision was already shaping his future. Weeks earlier, Daniel was in chaos. His finances were always tight, his mornings rushed, his thoughts scattered. He worked hard, yet nothing ever seemed to move forward. One evening, after another day of frustration, he came across a passage from Napoleon Hill. Control begins with the mind. A man who cannot discipline his thoughts will never discipline his life. Those words hit him like a bolt of lightning. That night, Daniel promised himself he would change, not someday, but now. The turning point. Daniel started with the hardest part, his emotions around money. He realized that every impulse purchase, every dinner he couldn't afford, every "I deserve this" moment was nothing but an emotional escape that left him weaker. So he did what very few men dare to do. He faced the truth. He opened his banking app and wrote everything down. For the first time, he saw his reality on paper: the debts, the random charges, the coffee runs, the late-night online buys. It was uncomfortable. It was humbling. But it was necessary. If you want to master your life, Daniel whispered to himself, you must first master your numbers. Each expense that didn't build him was cut. Every dollar was given a job. His money, like his mind, would now move with purpose. And something remarkable happened. As he gained control of his finances, his stress began to fade. He no longer woke up worried. He no longer lived paycheck to paycheck. He started to see the power of order and how that order created peace, building the internal structure. But Daniel soon realized something deeper. Money wasn't the real issue. Discipline was. Napoleon Hill's teachings echoed in his mind. A man who is disorganized with his time will be disorganized with his wealth. So Daniel began to rebuild himself from the inside out. He started with his mornings. Instead of waking up late, scrolling through his phone, and rushing out the door, he created a morning routine. He woke early, hydrated, stretched his body, read a few pages of a great book, and wrote down his top 3 priorities for the day. It wasn't perfect at first. Some mornings he slipped. But every time he returned to his plan, his discipline grew stronger. He began to understand that a routine wasn't a prison. It was freedom. A solid routine gave him clarity. It gave him energy. It gave him a sense of control over his day that no amount of luck or talent could ever replace. Your routine is your runway, Daniel reminded himself. It is the platform from which greatness takes off. Focus, the hidden power. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel noticed something profound. Even with his finances and mornings in order, there was still one thing pulling him down: distraction. He lived in a world of constant noise, notifications, calls, random messages, and endless scrolling. His attention was scattered, and with it his progress. Then he remembered another principle of Hill. Where your attention goes, energy flows, and results follow. Daniel decided to reclaim his focus. He silenced every group chat that added no value. He deleted the apps that stole his time without building his future. He scheduled specific times to check messages and emails instead of being available to everyone, all the time. Most importantly, he began practicing deep work. Every morning, for 1 uninterrupted hour, he worked on his most important project. No phone. No distractions. Just him, his task, and his mind. At first, it was hard. His attention wandered. His hand reached for his phone almost on autopilot. But he stayed with it. Every minute of discipline was a small victory, and over time, those small victories stacked into massive progress. Daniel discovered what most men never will. Focus is a muscle. And once trained, it makes you unstoppable. Structure creates power. By the end of the first month, Daniel wasn't the same man. His finances were balanced. His mornings were productive. His focus was sharper than ever. He no longer felt like life was something happening to him. He was in control. He was directing his energy, his time, and his money with precision. The world around him began to shift. New opportunities appeared. People noticed the difference in him, his clarity, his presence, his confidence. And Daniel understood why. Life gives more to the man who shows he can handle more. By mastering himself, Daniel was quietly telling the universe, I am ready. The power of consistency. Success didn't happen overnight. There were days when Daniel slipped, when he overspent, when he skipped his routine, when he lost his focus. But instead of quitting, he returned to his system every time. That was his real breakthrough, understanding that success isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. One step, every day, in the right direction. That is how you build an unshakable foundation. A man of purpose. Months later, Daniel sat at his desk in the early morning, journaling as the sun rose. His business was growing. His savings account was healthy. But more importantly, his mind was calm, his days were structured, and his confidence was unshakable. He had become a man of purpose, not by luck, not by talent, but by building systems and honoring them every single day. And he realized that was the secret all along. Control your mind. Control your money. Control your focus. Because a man who lives with order becomes a man who builds with power. Daniel's story is not unique. It is available to any man willing to decide, truly decide, to take command of his life. Start today. Look at your numbers. Design your routine. Protect your focus. Because the man who chooses order over chaos doesn't just survive, he builds. He grows. He becomes. And as Napoleon Hill would say, when you are ready, truly ready, the world itself will conspire to help you grow. Would you like me to adjust the tone further to make it even more dramatic and cinematic? Or keep it motivational and grounded like this? Part 4. The power of a definite plan. Daniel woke up before the first light of dawn. The morning air was cold, almost biting, but his mind was clear. The lessons from the last few weeks echoed like a steady drumbeat in his mind. Order your finances. Build your routine. Guard your focus. But now, as he sat by his small desk with a notebook in front of him, a new thought began to rise: clarity. He had learned from his mentor, Mr. Harrington, that all power begins with a definite plan, and that no man ever rises beyond his level of organization and clarity. Daniel, the old man had said just days earlier, Most men drift through life not because they lack talent, but because they lack direction. They wake up each day reacting to the world instead of creating it. If you want to build the life you've dreamed of, you must create a map, a plan so clear that every action you take moves you toward it. Those words lingered now, pushing him to pick up his pen. He began writing, slowly at first, then faster, as if his mind had been waiting for this release. What do I truly want? What am I willing to give in exchange? What daily actions will I take to move forward? The pen scratched across the page. By the time the sun had started painting the horizon, Daniel had something in his hands he never had before. A written plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. A blueprint that would now guide his days instead of random whims and vague intentions. He smiled to himself, realizing that for the first time, his dreams had structure. That afternoon, he met Mr. Harrington at the quiet cafe by the river. The old mentor leaned back in his chair, sipping his black coffee, as Daniel handed him the notebook. Harrington adjusted his glasses, read silently, and then smiled. "This," he said, tapping the page, "is the difference between wishing and building. Most men wish for success. They talk about their dreams, but they never anchor them in reality. You have just created your foundation, Daniel. From here, you will not wander aimlessly. Every decision, every action, every dollar you spend will now have a purpose. But what if the plan isn't perfect?" Daniel asked cautiously. "Perfection?" Harrington chuckled. "Perfection is the excuse of procrastinators. It's not about making the perfect plan. It's about making a definite one and adjusting as you grow. A ship that leaves the harbor with a course will always reach its destination faster than one that drifts with the tide. Adjust along the way, but never drift." In the weeks that followed, Daniel committed himself fully to the plan. His mornings were no longer chaotic. They were deliberate. He rose early, reviewed his goals, and visualized the man he was becoming. Disciplined, focused, and unstoppable. Each day, he carried a small card in his wallet with his primary goal written in bold letters. "I am building a life of financial strength, mental clarity, and lasting purpose. Every action I take moves me closer to this vision." Whenever doubts crept in, and they often did, he would pull out the card and read it silently until the fears subsided. It was as though the card reminded him of the power of a definite chief aim, the very principle Napoleon Hill had spoken about. A burning desire backed by a definite plan always finds its way into reality. But Daniel's transformation wasn't without tests. One evening, after a long week of disciplined work, his friends invited him out. "Come on, man," one of them said. "You've been too serious lately. One night won't hurt." For a moment, the old Daniel almost agreed. The thought of breaking free, of indulging in the old habits, was tempting. But then, almost instinctively, his hand brushed against the card in his wallet. He remembered his plan. He remembered why he started. He smiled politely and shook his head. "Not tonight. I've got work to do." His friends laughed, teased him, but Daniel didn't mind. He knew they wouldn't understand, not yet. And that night, as he reviewed his notes and refined his strategy for the coming week, he realized something profound. Discipline feels like sacrifice at first, but later, it feels like freedom. One Sunday morning, Harrington invited Daniel to his study, a room filled with old books, handwritten notes, and a large wooden desk. On the wall hung a framed quote. "A goal without a plan is only a wish." "Daniel," Harrington began, "do you know the secret of men who build empires, who leave legacies that outlive them?" Daniel shook his head. "They all understand structure. They build systems, not just moments. They plan their work and work their plan. And when distractions come, because they will, They returned to their plan like a sailor returns to his compass during a storm. That's how they stay the course while others drift. Harrington leaned forward, his voice low but firm. From today, I want you to track everything: your income, your expenses, your hours, your habits. Not to control you, but to give you clarity. Because clarity creates confidence, and confidence builds momentum. And momentum, he said, smiling, creates miracles. Daniel followed the advice. He created spreadsheets for his finances, journals for his progress, and a simple chart to track his habits. At first, it felt tedious. But soon, patterns began to emerge. He could see where he wasted time, where money slipped through his fingers, where his focus wavered. With that awareness came power. Each week, he adjusted. He cut what didn't serve him, doubled down on what did, and little by little, the chaos that once ruled his life began to fade. One evening, as the city lights flickered in the distance, Daniel reflected on how far he had come. It had been only a few months, but he felt like a different man, not because everything had changed, but because he had changed. He understood now that success wasn't a single leap. It was the sum of small, consistent steps, guided by clarity and fueled by purpose. Structure, he whispered to himself, is freedom. And so, his days became an unshakable rhythm: morning clarity, goals, gratitude, movement. Focused work, no distractions, one task at a time. Strategic review, what worked, what didn't, and how to adjust. Quiet reflection before sleep, planning for the next day, ending with gratitude. Each day, the plan guided him. Each week, the structure made him stronger. And each month, the results, though small at first, began to compound. His savings grew. His confidence deepened. His mind sharpened. And deep within, Daniel knew this was only the beginning. Because the man who has a plan, and the discipline to follow it, is a man that nothing, not doubt, not fear, not circumstance, can truly stop. Would you like me to start part 5 with the next principle, like building powerful habits or the mastermind concept, in the same story style? Part 5. The mastermind principle. The winter air had grown sharp, and Daniel could see his breath as he stepped out of his apartment that morning. The city was quiet, almost still, but inside his mind, there was movement, constant, restless thought. His plan was working. His habits were becoming stronger. His confidence was steady. But deep inside, he felt something missing. It wasn't clarity. It wasn't discipline. It was connection. He didn't have to search long for the answer. In one of the books Mr. Harrington had given him, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, a sentence had stayed with him. No one has ever risen to great heights without the aid of others. A single brain can accomplish much, but when it connects with other focused, disciplined minds, its power multiplies 100-fold. Later that week, Daniel met Harrington again at the same riverside cafe where so many lessons had begun. The old man was already waiting, sipping his coffee, a knowing smile on his face. "You've built your plan," Harrington said without greeting. "You've created structure. But now, Daniel, it's time for the principle that transforms good men into great ones, the Mastermind Alliance." Daniel leaned forward. "Mastermind?" Harrington nodded. "Yes. The coordination of knowledge, effort, and purpose between two or more people, working toward a definite aim. One mind, however brilliant, will always have limits. But when you surround yourself with like-minded individuals, disciplined, driven, purposeful, your power multiplies. It's like adding fuel to a fire." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the people in his life. Some were friends from his old routines, good-hearted but unfocused. Others were casual acquaintances, more interested in distractions than growth. Who, he whispered to himself, will help me rise higher? By morning, he had made a list of 3 people he admired: Michael, a sharp young entrepreneur he had met at a seminar; Elena, a disciplined fitness coach whose energy and clarity were magnetic; Professor Green, a retired investor with a wealth of experience and an eagerness to teach. Each of them had traits Daniel wanted to develop. And more importantly, each of them had a hunger for growth. The first call he made was to Michael. "Coffee?" Michael said when Daniel suggested a meeting. "I was just thinking about you. Let's talk." They met that evening at a small cafe downtown. Michael listened intently as Daniel shared his plan, his progress, and his desire to build a circle of accountability and support. Michael grinned. "I've been looking for the same thing. Let's do it. But let's make it structured, no empty talk. Goals, actions, progress reports every week." By the end of the meeting, they had agreed to meet every Thursday evening to share their progress, their challenges, and their victories. It wasn't just friendship, it was an alliance. The second call was to Elena. She was skeptical at first. "Why me?" she asked bluntly. "Because you have the discipline I want to master," Daniel said without hesitation. "I believe if we combine our strengths, my planning, your consistency, we can both grow faster." There was a pause, then a laugh. "You're serious, aren't you? All right, I'm in. But I don't do excuses, Daniel. If you say you'll do something, you'd better do it." Finally, Daniel met with Professor Green. The old man's study smelled of leather and old books, his walls lined with decades of wisdom. "So," Green said, leaning on his cane, "you want me to mentor you. Why should I?" Daniel hesitated for a moment but then spoke with quiet conviction. "Because I'm committed. I'm not looking for shortcuts, just guidance. And I'll do the work, every single day." Green studied him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Come back next Saturday. Bring your notebook. And be ready to listen." Within weeks, Daniel's life began to accelerate. Every Thursday, his meetings with Michael sharpened his business sense. They reviewed strategies, discussed challenges, and held each other accountable. Daniel found himself thinking more critically, making bolder but calculated decisions. On Mondays and Fridays, he met with Elena for early morning runs. At first, keeping pace with her was brutal. But week after week, his stamina grew, and with it, his discipline. Saturdays with Professor Green were a different kind of challenge, quiet, intense, and humbling. The professor drilled him on financial principles, decision-making, and long-term thinking. "Wealth," Green often said, "is less about the money and more about the man you become in the process." One evening, after a particularly long session with Michael, Daniel walked home under the glowing city lights, his mind buzzing. "This," he thought, "is the power Hill wrote about. The mastermind isn't just about people, it's about energy, about shared purpose. Alone, I was a spark. But with them, I'm becoming a fire." Of course, there were moments of doubt. When deadlines piled up, when habits felt heavy, when fear whispered that maybe he wasn't ready for this level of growth, Daniel leaned on his alliance. Michael would remind him of his progress. Elena would send a short, sharp message. "Don't stop. Keep running." And Green would quietly remind him. Pressure is the price of transformation. It was during one of those moments of doubt that Harrington called. "Daniel," he said simply, "never underestimate the power of proximity. You rise to the level of those around you. Stay close to minds that challenge you, that push you higher. And when you feel you can't go further, remember, a single step forward is still progress." Months passed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Daniel changed. His posture was straighter. His voice carried more conviction. His decisions were quicker, sharper, grounded in purpose. One afternoon, reviewing his journal, Daniel wrote a line that made him pause. "I no longer dream of success. I plan it. I build it. And now, I share the journey with others who are building too." One evening, during a group session with Michael and Elena, Daniel shared something Professor Green had told him. "Success is not a solo climb. It's a mountain best conquered with a team. Because when the climb gets steep, and it always does, it's the voices around you that remind you why you started." The room went quiet for a moment. Michael nodded slowly. Elena smiled. And in that silence, Daniel felt the truth settle deep in his chest. He wasn't alone anymore. He had his mastermind, his alliance of strength, vision, and relentless drive. By the time spring came, Daniel was no longer the man who had once drifted through life without purpose. He had a plan. He had habits. And now, he had a circle of powerful minds, all moving in the same direction, all committed to growth. And every day, as he reviewed his goals and adjusted his actions, he whispered the same words to himself. "Alone I can do much. Together, we can do anything." Would you like part 6 to focus on the principle of persistence and defeating fear, continuing in this style? Part 6. The triumph of persistence. The spring rain fell steady and cold as Daniel sat at his desk, the dim light of his study casting long shadows across his notes. His journal lay open, filled with plans, strategies, and victories, but tonight, his hands trembled. For the first time in months, fear had returned. His project, the one he had poured his time, energy, and heart into, had hit a wall. Investors hesitated. One key partner backed out. Progress stalled. The confident rhythm of his days cracked, leaving behind an echo of doubt. "What if I fail?" Daniel whispered into the quiet room. But then, a voice rose in his mind, a line from Napoleon Hill that had been drilled into him by Mr. Harrington and Professor Green. "Every adversity carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit, but only for the man who refuses to quit." The next morning, Daniel met with his mastermind group. His voice was steady as he explained the challenges, but his eyes betrayed his unease. Michael leaned forward first. "You've come too far to let a roadblock stop you. Adjust your strategy, but keep moving." Elena crossed her arms and added sharply, "Fear isn't real unless you feed it. This is your moment to prove your discipline. Persist." Professor Green simply sipped his tea before speaking, his voice calm but firm. "Pressure reveals character, Daniel. Decide who you want to be, the man who folds, or the man who finds a way." That evening, Daniel walked the city streets alone, the noise of traffic fading into the background. His thoughts spiraled, fear, frustration, doubt, until, at last, clarity struck. "This is the test," he thought. "The principle Harrington always spoke about. Persistence. The one trait that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary." He returned home, sat at his desk, and wrote in his journal with fierce, unshaking resolve. "I will not quit. I will review my plan, adjust my actions, but my goal remains the same. Fear will not own me. I persist until..." The days that followed were grueling. Daniel tightened his schedule. He rose earlier, reviewed his goals twice a day, and sharpened his focus. Every no from an investor became fuel. Every setback became a challenge to solve, not a reason to stop. When doubt whispered at night, he answered it aloud. "I am closer than I've ever been. One more step. One more call. One more day." Weeks passed. Then, one morning, as the sun broke through the clouds, his phone rang. It was Michael. "You're not going to believe this," Michael said, his voice electric. Remember that investor we pitched 2 months ago? They're in full funding. They want to meet tomorrow. Daniel closed his eyes, his chest tight with gratitude and relief. Not because the money had come, but because persistence, relentless, disciplined persistence, had carried him through. Later that week, standing in the conference room overlooking the city skyline, Daniel signed the final documents that brought his project to life. The deal was done. His vision was now reality. When the room cleared and the noise faded, he stepped to the window, gazing at the city below. He remembered the man he had been, aimless, fearful, drifting. And now, focused, disciplined, and unshakably persistent, he felt a quiet pride. This, he thought, is what happens when you refuse to quit. That evening, Harrington called. "I hear congratulations are in order," the old mentor said, his voice warm with quiet pride. "Yes," Daniel replied, smiling. "But more than that, I finally understand. Success isn't the victory, it's the man you become through persistence. The goal changes you long before you reach it." Harrington chuckled. "Exactly. Remember, Daniel, fear never fully disappears. But persistence makes it irrelevant. You've built a foundation now. Whatever you do next, you'll do it with strength." Months later, as his project flourished, Daniel continued his habits: daily visualization, disciplined routines, and weekly mastermind sessions. The momentum never stopped, because he understood now that success was a practice, not a destination point. One evening, during a quiet reflection by the river where his journey had truly begun, he wrote his final journal entry for the season. "Success is not luck. It is clarity of purpose, disciplined action, and relentless persistence. Fear knocked often, but I never opened the door. I didn't stop, and that is why I won." The lesson was clear. Persistence had transformed him. It had taken the man who once questioned his worth and turned him into a creator, a leader, a builder of his own destiny. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel smiled, not because the journey was over, but because he finally understood that it had only just begun. Call to action if you found Daniel's journey inspiring, and you're ready to unlock your own potential with the timeless principles of Napoleon Hill. Like this story, if it lit a spark in you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that persistence defeats fear. Subscribe for more life-changing lessons in the power of purpose, discipline, and the mastermind principle. And most importantly, comment below, what goal will you persist toward, no matter how long it takes? Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve with persistence. Napoleon Hill.